So today on PedalBox, instead of doing anything else on this, we're going to go back to a project that was built, tracked, dailied, and then taken off the road for upgrades, which have still not happened. And it's been about 18 months, so we probably need to do something about it. So this is my Mk2 Golf. I've had it for about 7 years. It's a VR6, and I took it off the road nearly 18 months ago so that it could have an upgrade done to it. Really important upgrade that it desperately needed, that it had been lacking for all of those 7 years. Harnesses. That's it. It needs 2 holes drilled into the transmission tunnel, and as soon as that's done, it can have the plates welded in, the exhaust put back on, and it basically runs again.
So, what do you think this actually needs right now?
It needs a battery in it, it needs all of the airways putting back on it, the exhaust needs to go on. Obviously we need to drill the holes, which means taking the seats out, and then it needs an MOT. And for the MOT it's probably going to need discs and pads all round because it's been stood and they're pretty rusted. That uses exactly the same discs and pads. And that
we can just borrow them from...
And that has EBC yellow stuffs in anyway, which is what I wanted to put on this way back when.
Okay. So you reckon the exhaust will just drop straight in?
I'm pretty sure I took the exhaust out. Actually, one of the bits of maintenance...
No, you definitely took the exhaust out.
I definitely took the exhaust out. One of the bits of maintenance I did have to do when I took the exhaust out was replacing the steering rack because it was somewhat lethal.
Okay.
Hi, Ian.
So your
we've got
intake
is... Yeah, so that goes
all
down
apart
that,
there.
that goes down
that lives
side.
over here.
Throttle body's down here. The throttle body is here currently.
I don't think it lives there.
No, it doesn't. It goes in the back of there. But that's an after exhaust problem.
Yeah, so in theory, if we just tweak these out the way a little, because the last exhaust port's only here.
Yep.
So just drop and slot the whole thing.
We might need to lift it off. This is exactly as fun as it looks. The worst part is it's been so long since I actually looked at these seats, I can't 100% remember.
Did it just land on you or what?
Yeah, that just happened. Right, this. I've got a box of Pringles. It's actually still sealed. Shit you not, they smell factory fresh.
Well, they would.
I was not expecting it to be in quite so good condition. I'm genuinely fine.
That's lunch sorted.
So that's what hold the front to the seat in. Just a pin with a spring to stop it coming back through, and it sits in like that. Only once did I forget to put the pin in and then drive off, and I ended up in the boot. Only once. So once upon a time this car failed the MOT. And the reason it failed was because the seat back didn't lock to the base, because whoever had had these seats before me had just ragged it across the shark's tooth and it had worn it down, so it no longer engaged. So in my wisdom, I said to the garage, can you just weld them? Sure. Now this doesn't bend forward, and I've just remembered this. And I sort of wish I hadn't. I have a slightly larger problem. These are what I've had sitting around for the past probably 2 years, maybe even more than that, to weld into the tunnel. These are not the right size threaded bolts.
Shit. Now the manifold was only removed in the first place to get access to the steering rack for some other work that Adrian was doing a while ago. So although keeping access to the seatbelt mounts meant we couldn't put the middle section of the exhaust back, we could at least put the manifold back on, which would let us start the engine without spewing fire directly onto the bulkhead. So with the manifold back on, we could get on with trying to start the car.
So after all these years, the heat wrap on this is finally giving up. So I'm wrapping some wire around it to try and preserve it a little bit longer. So while this is off, because I tend to give this a clean because sometimes it gets really sticky and doesn't go particularly well, I'm going to give this a decent clean through the inside and make sure it's actually operating even remotely free. If you don't have a picnic table in your home to do this on, go and get a picnic table. They drain. Right, this can go back on.
Happy days.
This car has sat for longer than this, admittedly not in this state, but this car's sat for longer than this length of time before, and when the battery's been connected back up to it, it has turned on the key and fired. I really don't want it to let me down. I'd really like it to keep up its near enough 100% record of being mothballed for a while and then just turning on the key, which would be really cool. Bit of a long shot, and it got really dark really quick, so we're going to quickly see if it'll fire. I'm not sure it will, but I think that's more because I think I've forgotten something more than anything else.
On fire! New fuel lines.
We thought the fuel lines would survive a test run and trip to the MOT station, but they'd actually perished worse than we thought, and when we tried starting the engine, they got hit with fuel pressure and the feed line popped. Unfortunately, some of the stray fuel found a spark somewhere, which we're going to look into, and we ended up with a fire, which isn't really very good when you're working to a tight deadline.
Not long after this, we found out we hadn't actually got any show passes for our cars, so it was all for naught. Although, on the plus side, the car is at least a little bit more complete than it was a few weeks ago, in spite of the fire.
In the end, I'm kind of okay with not getting passes. The standard and variety of cars that were at the show was amazing, and it's little wonder that my bone stock SD1 or Aid's VR6 Golf here didn't make it in. Roadkill being a US show, I kind of expected a very American-centric lineup. There were a lot of European cars, especially British, complementing the American stuff, and a nice range of stock, modified, and even full custom cars like this 3-rotor E-Type, which is amazing, saved from scrap, and this aluminium-bodied hot rod with hand controls built by a dude called Rogan, who hopefully we're going to go and see early next year, so you should get to see him again in a future episode.